Sue Donaldson and her husband, Mark, live in San Luis Obispo. I can never say that, California. Sue is a former high school English teacher, and she spent some of those years in Brazil with Wycliffe Bible translators. Together, she and her husband have raised 3 daughters who keep them at the bank and on their knees. Sue's love and gifting is connecting people to one another, to God, and to His Word. She's a speaker, a blogger, and a podcaster who has a heart for hospitality. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much, Jen, for having me. It's going to be a blast.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. Well, that told us quite a bit about you, but why don't you just tell us a little bit more, like where you grew up, how you met your husband, maybe what a perfect weekend looks like?
Okay. I grew up in Southern California, have Midwest roots, and how I met my husband is a totally different hour-long podcast. So to make it short, he's from Iowa, came out to Southern California. I met him in the driveway of my ex-boyfriend because I was saying goodbye to him, and Mark was starting to rent in the same house. And so I think he fell for me right then, but of course it took a while. So he proposed 3 months later, and I said no. And then 3 years later, I said yes. Aww. And he was already living in San Luis Obispo, so I married into the town almost 34 years ago.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. Yes, that would be a fun, full story to hear.
Yeah, another time.
Yeah. So what do you guys enjoy doing in California? You have a lot more weather options, a lot more options because of the weather than we do. But what does a weekend look like for you?
Well, we have this great trail that doesn't have hills. So at my age, I prefer that, and it has shade. We are by the ocean, about 7 minutes from the ocean, so there's always a breeze. So we walk our dog down the Bob Jones Trail often, or we are Netflix binging Downton Abbey right now because my husband never made it through the first time, and we had tickets to go to the Downton Abbey castle. We love to travel, but it was canceled 3 times because of the shutdown. Oh. So we just went to Ojai instead. But we'll go someday.
Yes.
Yeah. He loves history. He loves history, and I love to eat. So we go on cruises too.
That sounds so fun. I love it. So, well, today we get to talk about your favorite topic, hospitality.
Yes.
So I thought maybe we should start with a clarifying question. I think that hospitality and entertaining, at least in the context of having people into your home, are often just used interchangeably. But I suspect that there's a difference. So how would you define these two things, and what is the difference?
Well, the biblical definition of hospitality is welcoming strangers, and that could also be for entertaining. But the main 2 differences that I see, there's a difference of focus and a difference of purpose between the 2. The one reason people say I don't do hospitality is because they have the wrong idea of hospitality, because they've put the picture of entertaining on top of it, and that can stop you in your tracks, can stop me in my tracks. And I was raised with hospitality. I'm not a Pinterest type person as far as, or Martha Stewart as far as entertaining, but the main 2 things are focus and purpose. So for entertaining, the focus can often be the hostess, so that's why we get uptight. I just asked on my Facebook group yesterday, what is your mental block against hospitality? And people were saying my home, my cooking, my time, my money. All these were focusing on themselves. So that's actually they're thinking entertaining, but see, we get so mixed up. So then the focus of hospitality is the guest. See, there's such a difference. Yes. So when you think of Jesus coming to your house, you're really going to focus on him, right? But you're also going to think, oh dear, did I brush my teeth? So there's that. Of course, there's some moderation there, but the main thing is how can I, and then the other thing is purpose. How can I serve you? That's the purpose of hospitality. How can I impress you? Possibly is the purpose of entertaining. So see how that, you just take the pressure off yourself when you're doing it to serve. I remember right before Thanksgiving, a lot of people were coming, but also my brother was coming. I'm very close with my brother. It was no big deal. Hi, Uncle Steve's coming. The kids were thrilled, blah, blah, blah. But I was thinking about this, and in my quiet time that morning, I thought, Lord, how can I serve my brother and his wife, even though I've known him my whole life? And it turned out to be a real time of ministry with them. And I went back to that prayer that even though they're family, God had a use for my hosting them over that particular Thanksgiving. You see the difference there?
Yes, I love that. That's
Mhm.
so helpful because I remember as a younger mom having somebody say, "I love hospitality. I always make sure that there's a theme and a game and every guest goes home with something."
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, "Wow, that feels like entertaining, but you're
Mm.
calling it hospitality." And so I kind of said, "Well, that's not viable right now." But I love that distinction because it removes so many barriers.
It does.
So you mentioned that you kind of grew up with it. That was going to be my next question, was like, how did you learn this? Was it modeled? Was it nurtured? You're saying it was kind of modeled for you.
Totally modeled. And that's usually the first thing I write and speak on this a lot. And the first time I did was, I don't know, 25 years ago, just to a bunch of college girls at our church. And we did it with a friend, and we listed 17 reasons why not to do hospitality. And then we put the letter P by most of them, which stands for pride.
Mm,
And my mom was a not a prideful person. She's a pretty humble woman out of the Depression era, but she loved people. And I think people, I mean, she liked to use nice china sometimes, whatever, but
mhm.
that wasn't her emphasis. The emphasis, she was a people collector, really.
Yeah.
And I've sort of got that personality, but you don't have to have the personality. You just have to have a hospitality, what I like to call hospitality mindset, where I wake up every morning and say, Lord, who am I going to meet today that might need your invitation, which may include inviting them into my home,
Mhm.
either today or I have women coming over for a women's wine night tomorrow night, as well as the following Thursday. And I just send it out to a bunch of people, like servers in restaurants. People are lonely, especially after the shutdown. But I did this long before the shutdown because they don't get together because we're so busy.
Yeah.
That you're a mompreneur or whatever, however you spell that.
Mompreneur, yes.
Yeah, there we go. And we need each other.
Yeah.
We need to sit down and ask some pertinent questions and let someone who doesn't know God know that they are noticed by him. I mean, remember Hagar, she felt noticed by God. I think that was hospitality.
Mhm.
That was God's hospitality on her. And hopefully she took that and said, I'm going to welcome other people to his hospitality,
Mhm.
So the fact that yours is called This Mom Knows, God knows. God knows which person that I'm going to see today, whether it's someone in the grocery store in line or at the post office, hand them my card and say, hey, what's your contact information? Would you like to get together for coffee? I don't
Yeah.
do that with every person I meet, but the idea is to be ready.
Mhm. Okay.
So
So
does that
you
help?
had it, yeah, you had it modeled for you, but what if you grew up in a home where it wasn't modeled for you?
Oh,
How
yeah.
could you nurture this?
That is so great. And that is the first thing I talk about when I speak on hospitality is
Mhm.
if it was not modeled, what do you do about it? Well, I have a bunch of steps I could tell you, and maybe we'll get to them. But I want to tell you a story about my mother, who was this hospitality queen. When I first did first time I did this workshop, my mom was visiting and my sister, and I said, hey, you two are good at this. Just give me some research. Tell me about, and I asked them a bunch of questions about hospitality. Well, my mother completely shocked me by saying, oh, well, when your dad and I were first married, they had 2 kids, 2 sons, my older brothers. They lived in New Jersey, and your dad invited the whole deacon board over for pie and coffee. And I could make pie, those old days when people made pie. I could make pie, but I didn't know how to make coffee. And I had this coffee thing, probably it was a stovetop percolator,
Mhm.
on the stove. And she goes, it was new. I didn't know what to do. And I sliced all the pieces of pie on all the plates. And then I put a scoop of ice cream. This is a no, don't do this. She put a scoop of ice cream on all the plates. And then I couldn't get the lid off this vacuum topped coffee pot, she said, for 30 minutes.
Oh no.
And by then, you can imagine the ice cream, the pie, everything she said. And the whole time I'm like sweaty and listening. I go, Mom. And she said, I was mortified. I go, of course you're mortified. I'm mortified listening to this. I said, why didn't you serve the pie and ice cream and say, the coffee is the real dessert, and they would just laugh. And she said, I would do that now.
Mm.
But then she felt so insecure. She didn't know what to do. We've all been there. We've all been, less secure in some area. And I said, besides, they were probably all engineers. They would have loved coming into your kitchen and trying to figure out this new gadget. Speaking of gadgets later on. And
Yeah.
so this is the point. My mom would do it differently as she matured. So really part of maturing is not thinking about yourself and being able to laugh at yourself.
Mhm.
Because when we laugh, I don't take myself very seriously, and that makes everybody else be a lot more relaxed. I
Yeah.
talk about imperfect hospitality and my culinary. I made purple chicken. That's a whole nother story. You do these things, you're a little embarrassed, you sweat a little, and then, well, you've made a friend, basically.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is Philip Yancey uses, the Christian author, he uses this expression, breaking the chain of ungrace. So my mom herself did not receive hospitality in her home, but we received hospitality. But I had never known that my mom had this horrific experience, really the first probably 5 or 10 years of her marriage, until she just did it anyway. And that's why it's called practicing hospitality. Like anything, practicing the piano. Well, my husband practices medicine. It's a little more dangerous if he makes a mistake. But I guess I could poison someone with imperfect hospitality. But the point is
But at least
that
your husband's there to step in. So
there we go. Or at least call the ambulance.
yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty good. But the deal is that my mother, unbeknownst to me, through God's grace, broke a chain of ungrace in her life so that my 4 brothers and sisters, we all know how to do hospitality. We do it differently. We're very different personalities. But we can all make coffee, and some of us buy the pie. But the point is that my mom broke something in her past for the sake, really for herself, because she loved it. But anyone listening today can call upon the Lord and make that grace happen in your family. And we need to do it for the sake of our children. One of my daughters is an extreme introvert, like her daddy, but she can run a room. She might be uncomfortable doing it for the time being, but she knows how to do it because she was raised in it. Yeah. So really get over ourselves, Mom. We need to do it for the sake of our children, but also we need to do it because we're lonely.
Mm-hmm. And so really what I hear you saying is we talk about what it is and how to do it. It really sounds like it is at the heart of it. It is all about relationship.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And about God.
Yes.
I'd say it's all about God because he was the ultimate host. Yeah. Because he invited you and I to his table. Mm-hmm. And I like to say that maybe someone coming tomorrow night to my house in the living room after I get all the dog hair out of there may only meet Jesus on my couch. He may only meet Jesus coming to your table, Jen, so I better invite them. Yeah. Not that I have the onus of salvation, of someone else's salvation on me. Right. But maybe that's where God wants to start with that person.
Yeah. 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 Who am I to stand in the way of how God wants to work? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So being relational, God's relationship with them and our relationship with people, sometimes relationships just flow and they come naturally, and sometimes they feel like a lot of hard work. And I think usually it's because of the stranger element. We're just getting to know someone. That can feel hard. So how can we make that feel more natural and comfortable, especially when it comes to conversation? And you've hinted at this, but do you have to be an extrovert to do this?
Oh, absolutely not. Some of my most talkative friends are introverts, but you have to give them the space to chat. Yeah. And they prefer to let someone else talk if it's a larger group. But if it's just 1 or 2 people, then they will share their heart more readily. And like the group coming tomorrow night, I may only have 2 or 3, and I'm a little concerned because I like a group of 10. But then I thought, I have to leave this in the Lord's hands because there might be more sharing, deeper sharing. In fact, my husband has said to me in the past, it's really annoyed me, actually. And I quoted him in my first book because he's right. He says, if you invite more people, it dissipates the fellowship. Where did he get that word? He always says,
right.
He still says it after 30 years. It dissipates the fellowship. I go, I don't care. I have to clean the house the same way for 30 people as I do for 5. So let me do this. No, I have to defer to him a lot, believe me. Except for the holidays, I can have as many people as I want. But The point is that if you were talking about an introvert, if you ask them a question to show that you are interested in their life, they will feel God's love and noticing on their life.
Mm.
And I, based on that, I've written 2 books, conversation starters, because I like to start with a question that's not very intimate. That's a surface question. San Luis Obispo is a unique town. It's a college town, and it's expensive to live here, and it's away from a lot of industry. So it's always a curiosity to me is, how come you moved to San Luis Obispo? Are you a professor at the college? Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a sample question. So if I have a group of people, women around my table for coffee, and half go to church and half don't, and I can say, so everybody say a little bit about their family, and then why did you move to San Luis, or what's your favorite restaurant? Something very bland that it takes the sting off of having to think of something quick if you give them an easy question. It's not our responsibility to stump our guests.
Right.
It's our part of serving them is to make them feel comfortable, And then the second question may be a little deeper. Last time I asked, we had dessert in the backyard because of the shutdown. And I asked all the women, most did not know each other. We had 11, 2 nights in a row. And I asked them, where would you go on a road trip, and who would you take with you? And that was so hilarious and they could be live or dead. So like the first gal was an introvert. She goes, oh, great. Thanks for asking me first. But she was also a friend. But she said, I think I would go up the coast through Washington, and Taylor Swift would be by my side. And I thought, great, you wouldn't have to turn on the radio. But then my second question was, how have you been brave this last 12 months? See how that's so much more intimate. And everybody did that. And if they couldn't think of something, if I knew them, I said, oh, remember you started homeschooling because you had to. And that was such a challenge for you. And she goes, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And then someone else keyed into that. So the cool thing about that, even if I just have 6 people, is that after the questions are and people are getting up to use the bathroom or they're getting more coffee, they start connecting as friends. I can't be everybody's friend, but I do like to network people together, connect them. Where I see them exchanging phone numbers, it's really such a joy.
Yeah. Oh,
Did that help?
Yes, I love that. Especially the conversation starters. And you said you have 2 books that have those.
Well, one's a printable, and some people prefer that because they only have to print off the pages they want. And then one of my brothers bought it. I said, why are you buying this? He's such an extrovert. He makes me seem like an introvert. But it's because his wife is an introvert, and they were having strangers for Thanksgiving a couple years ago. And he goes, oh, well, Karen wants me to help in the kitchen, like carve the turkey. And so she's a little uncomfortable. So we bought your conversation starters. He was texting me this Thanksgiving morning. It's not like I had a lot of time. And he goes, I cut them in slats, like I have little dots, and then we folded them, put them in a basket. So these strangers, these guests, were picking them up, answering them, and they could hear them because it was an open kitchen. And everybody's laughing and getting to know each other. And then that sets the tone for the conversation once everybody's seated around the table.
That's a great idea.
It's fun.
Yeah. Since we're on Thanksgiving, I'll tell you something that my kids have loved for us to do, because we'll often have non-family for Thanksgiving. And we have a lot of international students by us. And so we'll have them come in. And so they'll cut out pieces of paper, and they have everyone fill it out, and then we roll it up, and then we put it in a croissant and roll the croissant and bake it like a fortune cookie. The paper doesn't burn.
And the paper is not like, they don't care about germs or anything.
Paper's fine, the germs bake away, right? So so then you pass out the rolls, and everyone pulls theirs out, and they read it, and we have to guess who wrote what they were thankful for.
It? I've heard that part. So that fortune cookie thing is I'm going to write that one down. In fact, you're in my Facebook group. Why don't you write that up and share it, and then I'll have everybody.
Sure, sounds good.
See it, because I think that's a great idea.
Anyways, and I don't remember where we got that, but that's become a tradition, and that's always interesting to get to know people.
So the point is to figure out who said it.
Yes, yes, and so it's a good
Uh,
way to it's kinda like a gentle icebreaker, you know,
yeah, sure it
but,
is. Absolutely, and
yeah,
it's funny, and then you can eat it.
right, then you eat the roll, so so when your girls were growing up, was your
Mhm.
house the hangout house? Did you extend hospitality to their friends that way?
Yeah, they were all in sports, especially
Mm,
soccer, and, so the coaches always ask for volunteers for the soccer pasta parties, the night before they play a game, and so my kids felt the freedom to invite everybody over and their parents,
mm,
and, it was good for them because they felt good to have their friends in their home,
mhm,
even the quiet daughter, because she knew it would be okay and I wouldn't embarrass her too much, and I always said the blessing, even though it wasn't a Christian soccer team,
mhm,
and, and then her friends told her later that they always felt comfortable here. They came from broken homes,
mm,
uh, a lot of sadness, and to keep track of that one doesn't like chocolate and one only eats strawberries, things like that.
yeah,
It shows love really to your children first,
mhm,
that they feel comfortable. Because my best friend growing up, we weren't allowed to walk through her living room, not even walk through it. Even she wasn't,
mm,
because of the way they felt about hospitality or entertaining in their front room was just for the adults. And I had a friend when I first married, she had 5 daughters, and they had a ping pong table in their living room. I asked her one day, I go, Diane, why do you have this here? And she goes, well, I have 5 beautiful daughters, and I want everybody coming here. So if
mm,
we set it up where it's comfortable for the boys to come to, I know where they are.
yeah,
And I thought, that's really smart. So we don't have a ping pong table, but we try to make it so that it's comfortable and that I'm not annoying to their friends,
right,
well, other welcoming. So I wouldn't say, we had everything that everybody else had, but
mhm,
we just tried to, even simple food, hamburgers and French fries and things like that.
mhm. That's great, and that's a good point. It's that, relationship with your kids first and then with their friends, and,
Yeah,
yeah, it's something to aspire for, but I think it's something that we have to be very intentional about, not just hope happens.
right,
So,
right.
yeah.
You do have to think about that. And um, like my oldest daughter lives in San Francisco, and one time for Memorial Day weekend, she texted me. I was at work, and she said, "Mom, can I invite some friends down for Memorial Day weekend?" And I said, "Sure. How many?" She said, 12. I go, 12? That sounded like a lot because it's 3 nights sleeping in our house.
Yeah.
And I said to her, because I was a little annoyed, and I said, I don't have 12 sets of guest towels. Can you have them bring their own towels? And she said, no, I don't feel comfortable asking them that. And I
Mm.
thought, of course, and I thought to myself, I have written at that point, I'd written 2 books on hospitality. I need to get over it. I can go to Costco. I'll take out a loan. I'll buy towels. Oh, towels are expensive. And, um, and so I calmed down a little bit. Then she made a spreadsheet because she's one of those girls. And then it ended up being 20 kids who came. And these kids were like 28 to 32 in med school, working for an executive for Banana Republic, Google, Amazon. And she works for Zillow, and most of them not believers.
Mm.
And I was complaining to one of my neighbors about it. And she said, oh, well, she was recently divorced. She goes, I'll take 4. She took 4 different ones, 2 different nights, because the spreadsheet was like, Mom, this guy can come Friday night, but he has to go work on Saturday night. So more people are coming Saturday night. So I made 3 crockpot lasagnas the last night they were there. I could have used 4, because
Mm.
these kids are not used to home cooked food because they go out or they do Hello Fresh or Blue Apron. And I was exhausted, let me tell you
Ah,
that. But it was such an honor to
yeah.
host them and to let them be in a Christian environment. I mean, I wasn't sure who was sleeping in the tent in the side yard. It's not my job to check. But to know I could do that for the sake of my daughter
Yeah.
and for the sake of the gospel, I was glad we were out of town the following Memorial Day weekend, however.
Was that on purpose?
No, but when I remembered it, I thought, oh, this is nice. We're
Convenient.
not here.
That's funny. Well, has there been a season in your life where hospitality was harder to do? And I mean, maybe it was your time in Brazil where you had to adapt how you did it, but can you tell us about either of those things?
Um, I learned that how hard it was for working women when I went back to work when my kids were old enough for me to go back to work. And then I thought, well, you're on your feet all day or whatever you're doing, and you come home and you have to get your own family dinner. So then I could see, I have to be careful when I'm exhorting women to also do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different ways to do it. Like I've asked my husband, when is the best night for you as an introvert, as a doctor? He's with people all day, doesn't really want to talk to me even when he gets home. He said Saturday night. So that's a boundary I do to love my husband first.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly keep to that it's Saturday night. I invite a lot of single women over because he acts kind of like a surrogate. He helps fix their cars, looks at their owies. And it's good to have a man in someone's life when they've been divorced. So he's very comfortable with me inviting. But if I invite a couple, I need to check that out with him.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest adjustment for me was to marry someone so different from my parents, because my mom had company every Sunday. And Mark's family had company one time that he remembers. Both quiet people, not going to church much. Great people.
Mm-hmm.
They would entertain by taking someone to their country club, which my parents didn't know what that was, basically.
Yeah.
And so that was a big adjustment to me. I had to say, how often can we have company, or should we?
Mm-hmm.
And so after 33 years, we kind of have our, we know what to do. And I know he needs to step up at times. And he really is a great host. But he'd rather go get the extra chairs out of the garage and then just go upstairs. But I have to keep him downstairs sometimes.
Right.
But he's just a great servant, but he just does it differently than I would. So that in Brazil, no. Brazilians are the most hospitable people in the world. I just didn't speak their language, so I felt badly. I couldn't learn Portuguese enough in 2 years, so I only had Brazilians over who knew English. But I needed friends. So I invited people over 5 Friday nights in a row. That was my roommate's idea. And I made Apple Crisp 5 Friday nights in a row. And she made the guest list of all the different people each time so that I could make friends.
Ah, I love that. Well, you touched on this, but a lot of the moms listening are really busy. They're juggling their kids, they're juggling their businesses. And so this idea of hospitality can feel very overwhelming. So what can it look like? And what is one simple thing that she can do to be intentional about this, even in the midst of a busy schedule?
Yes, and I was totally busy and a little broke when I didn't get married till I was 35, and I was a high school teacher, so we didn't make a lot of money. I didn't make a lot of money. I had to grade papers every night, so no time. Even though I didn't have children, my students, I had 100 students that were my children, and but I was lonely when I first moved to that church, and I finally figured out that I had to do the inviting if I was going to make friends. So I invited about 6 women that I admired from church. I think they were all married. And they came for a Saturday brunch. So if you can figure out maybe one Saturday a month or every 2 months, you could even switch it around with different friends whose turn it is to host, because eggs are cheap compared to steak. You can do things in advance. You can buy things. And it's what you eat is not the focus. It's the people who are there.
Yeah.
And people like to chip in. I remember I had a chocolate open house. I invited 100 people at Christmas, and 50 came. And then the next Christmas came, and I said, oh, let's get ready for it. And my husband said, no, work was too stressful. Would you do something for women only? I said, okay. So that started Saturday morning power breakfast for shopping for the whole neighborhood. The women started bringing the food too. So it wasn't, because I had babies. That time I had 50 people. Bethany was in a cradle. They kept knocking into her. They thought it was like baby Jesus, but it was just Bethany who was a month old. But, that's exhausting. And so you have to, when people offer to help, you say yes, even if it's a stick of butter. It saves you a stick of butter, and it saves you a trip to the store. And for an introvert, I've heard them tell me this. I like being able to come into someone's home, a stranger's home, someone I don't know that well, with something in my hands. It's just kind of like a block. it's actually an invitation. It's ushering them into, hey, I brought this, and that's their contribution. So you're actually showing them love when you let them bring something.
Yeah.
So I can't even remember what your question was now, Jen.
Yeah, just like what's one simple step? I think you said
Oh,
it. Find a Saturday morning and just have a couple other moms over for breakfast.
yeah, and you can do this. I had 3 girlfriends. We did it because we weren't working, but our kids were small, so that way all our kids were together. And of course, the house was a disaster after it was your turn,
Mhm.
But we met together for 14 years.
Mm.
And I always like to say, ladies, if you start doing this next week, in 14 years, you can say, I've met with these friends for 14 years and we've prayed for each other's kids for 14 years.
Mhm.
And when one had to go back to work, she was moaning and groaning, I'll never get to meet with you. And I go, but it was part-time work. So I went right to, I used to have a calendar on the refrigerator, those days.
Yep.
And I went, it was my turn. So I went right to my refrigerator. I said, no, Grace, when are you not working next month and the next month? So we put it on the calendar when
Mhm.
she wasn't. And we worked around her schedule for her sake, but for ours, because we love Grace.
Mhm.
So
That's great. I pray with 2 other women named Jennifer, the Jennifers. The 3 of us pray once a month. They live in different parts of the country. And so
love
we
that.
do it over the phone, but it's that same thing. It's that intentional. And I think we're going on 12 years. So yeah, it's a neat thing to be able to do those connections like that over
Mhm,
time. Well,
mhm.
what's your favorite easy recipe to share when you do something?
Oh, shucks. I knew the answer to that question.
Well, you can
Um,
you can think of one
I
and I'll
think
link it.
it's chocolate cake
Okay.
because most people like chocolate
Yeah.
and homemade so much better. And it's so easy. It's on the back of the Hershey's cocoa can.
Mm.
And for years, I held on to that can thinking I would lose it until my practical girlfriend said, so you could write it down? And because sometimes the cocoa can recipe changes
Yeah.
at Hershey's and it's so good. And I like homemade frosting as well.
Mm.
So that's great. But I want to give you one more tip. Do you mind if I
Yeah.
share one more tip?
Please
Okay.
do.
Um, do it with a friend. If you're nervous
Mm.
about it, there's no shame in feeling nervous about something new. We all feel that way,
Mm.
but it doesn't mean we're not supposed to do it. So if you do it with a friend, someone else who says, yeah, I heard Sue speak on, or I read a book on hospitality, or I read Rosaria Butterfield's book, The Gospel Comes with a House Key, but I don't
Mhm.
like black beans. She keeps black beans in a crock pot. But I want to do something.
Mhm.
And so you get this friend and I call them, what do I call them? Backup friends,
Mm.
backup hosts, so that I have that host sitting at my table. We each invite someone else. So then you have 4 people, maybe 5 kids by that time or 12.
Yeah.
But the idea is that backup host, your friend, will keep that conversation going while you're finishing up, or the kids have just thrown, the whole Rice Krispies box has gone all over the floor.
Right?
It happens, but you have this friend, laughing and talking and asking questions. So
Yeah.
I specifically ask certain friends to my coffees where I have other people because I know they can keep and they're genuinely interested in people. You
Mhm.
need to get
Yeah.
someone who really loves other people. But you do it with a friend. So that tip has really been helpful to people.
That's great. That's great. And like you said, just do it because the more you do something, the confidence will follow later, but you got to
Right.
do it first to
Yeah, and
experience
I
it.
always say the Philippians verse. As soon as your doorbell rings, we have a long way to the doorbell. You just keep repeating. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all. Walk very slowly so you can pray it more, and then you just start and you do it. And if
Mhm.
it's a total failure, it doesn't matter because you're doing it for the Lord.
Yeah.
And mostly people just like to be invited, so don't worry about your house.
Yeah. That's great. Well, our time is coming to an end. But one question I love to ask everyone is what is your favorite time saving gadget? And maybe yours is even hospitality related.
I would say my KitchenAid mixer
Mm.
because it mixes things up really fast. But in regards to hospitality, I would say my freezer, because when I make things, especially cookie dough, this is another tip.
Mm.
When I make cookie dough, I make it 1.5 times, and then I freeze the batter in rolls of wax paper or saran wrap, and I put rolls of cookie dough in the freezer. And in
Ah,
fact, one time a friend was coming and I forgot, and she came to the door and I go, "Oh my gosh, Karen, I forgot you were coming. Come on in." And then while the tea water was boiling, I took them out of the freezer, sliced them up, put them in the oven, and she was like, "Sue had homemade cookies." I go, "Yeah, but I totally forgot you were coming." But the fact is, in my freezer, I have these rolls of dough in Ziploc bags.
that's brilliant. I'm afraid those wouldn't last in my house because I would just go eat the frozen
Well,
dough.
well, that's called self-control, but yeah, I've done that. And I also take baked goods when I go to like to get my hair done or to like I took my daughter to get a pedicure yesterday. I take baked
Mm.
goods. For one thing, I don't need them, and they don't bake. They're too busy
Mm.
working, or their culture, they don't bake a lot, and
Mhm.
they love it.
That's a great idea. I love that. Well, Sue, how can people connect with you? Where can they find you?
Well, my website is welcomeheart.com, based on God's Welcome Heart. In the shop are a bunch of resources. There's a course. Right now, it's being offered for 50% off. I can let you know that code, maybe in the show notes, because I don't know it by heart, just for this one gal whose podcast I'm on this week.
Mm.
And conversation starters. And then my podcast is Make It Count, Living a Legacy Life. And you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts, or I have an app, Make It Count Legacy.
Wonderful. And I know you've got a couple opt-ins that you'd like to offer. Do you want to tell us about those?
Oh, sure. One is a prayer for a hospitality heart. So it's kind of like when we have to pray to be willing to be made willing. We start there
Mm.
with prayer. And then a great recipe I got out of a mystery. I love mysteries that have recipes, like like killer pancakes or something like that. But this is a recipe for chicken satay, which is sort of a barbecue thing. And then, so you get those, the recipe and the prayer. And then also I speak a lot on mentoring, and I have a book on mentoring. So I sell 10 worksheets to help you know how to mentor with, how to get
Mm.
started with a mentoring relationship, but they're free to your audience today
Excellent.
and this
Thank
week.
you. And getting started with a mentoring relationship, that would be as the one doing the mentoring or as the one who wants to be mentored?
It's mostly for the one doing, but
Okay.
the book covers both aspects, because if you see someone and say, "Hey, I want you to mentor me," and they look at you kind of like
Right.
a deer in headlights, you say, "And I have this worksheet," and we can say, "This is what we'll do," like what to do the first time you meet, how to do a Bible study, your personal goals, all those things are there to help people.
Excellent.
It's
Well,
fun.
Sue, thank you so much. I will put links to all of this in the show notes.
Oh, thank you.
But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I hope it's a real blessing, and thank you for having me.